Moving along to our next wide receiver prospect. It is Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver, Mississippi, 6'1" 3/4 inches, 220 pounds, 10 3/8 inch hands. Wow. 4.46 in the 40, 1.54 in the 10-yard split. He had 22 bench press reps. That's all I got for the combine numbers. Last year in 13 games, he had 51 receptions, 861 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 4 rush attempts for some negative yards. So
you want to know his 3-cone in his pro day?
I do, because I didn't.
7.04.
Oh, that's not bad.
Even better.
Pretty good.
At almost 6'2"?
220?
220. He moves really well for being that size.
Really well.
He does. I was very impressed when I watched Jonathan Mingo. Now, there are certain guys that you look at the production and you're like, okay, I can bank on it because of production. There's other guys where you watch the tape.
There's no production.
There's not much production for Jonathan Mingo. So this is one of the ones where you have to really go to the tape and you have to look at traits.
Yep.
And I'm a big traits over production guy.
Me too.
Production's great, and I love it when they come together and you get both. That's awesome. But if I have to choose one, I want to choose traits over production, and that's what you have with Jonathan Mingo. He actually ended up being my 5th receiver in this class. Now, lower class, but 73.08.
Sorry, snooty booty.
I know, look at him.
Lower class.
Nose down over there, Garrett.
Let me get my, what's it called?
It's a spectacle.
Spectacle?
Or not a
That's
spectacle,
not-
but you were about to
monocle.
say
Monocle, that's it.
Monocle.
I was going to say spectacle too.
I know,
I
that's
was
what-
wrong.
That's why
There's an ectacle on it.
spectacle. It's
I'm
a
about
spectacle.
Garrett a monocle for Christmas.
I would wear it. I would 100% wear it.
You look like somebody could wear a monocle
Yeah.
too.
Like a
Like,
rocket. Maybe I would just do like the
if Garrett
curly
walked in with a top
mustache.
hat and a monocle, I'd be like, I always knew you had
Look
money.
at this Mr. Peanut looking mother.
Welcome to the lower class. With your high heels over there, Garrett.
Oh man.
Sorry, keep going.
No, I might end up doing like the curly mustache then too.
Oh yeah, you'd have to.
You have to if you have a monocle.
Obviously. Clearly.
Done and done.
How the monocle needs something to rest on?
Yeah, exactly. That little curl right there is what boing, boing. It's like a little spring.
Oh, it fell down.
Bling.
All right. So Jonathan Mingo, back to Mingo over here. He's the 5th wide receiver in this class. Got a 73.08. Very big, very physical receiver. But I was impressed with how well he moved for a guy of his size. And I think that was the thing that I walked away from this. Look, he's not this elite quickness, but he has decent foot frequency. His straight line speed is really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, evidenced by his 40 time, but it also shows up in games. Some of the guys, you see it in the 40, but you're like, and sometimes it's the opposite where they look a lot faster on the field. This one, I feel like they match pretty well. His game speed and his time speed look about the same to me, and it's really good for a guy of his size. Can do some of the things after the catch. His route running could use some cleaning up. It's fine.
I wrote decent.
Yeah. I think that's a fair way to put it.
I think he has the movement skills to improve, though. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
he's bursty. He can get in and out of breaks. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And we even heard the report from, I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah, Ian Rappaport, somebody like that. That
Two
talked about
receivers that NFL
Yes.
teams are way higher on than Twitter community.
that are
Cedric
moving
Tillman
up people's boards are Tillman and Mingo.
And Mingo.
Those are the two guys that are moving up NFL teams' boards.
Tillman and Mingo.
And
I'm good on one of those guys.
especially in a class where outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba, my other 3 receivers are all under 5'9". It's nice to have, or 5'9" or under. It's nice to have a guy of this size to be able to put up there. I think with the right grooming, with the right instruction, we could be looking at a legitimate X receiver in the NFL, which I can't say that about a lot of players.
I agree. He needs to develop a lot of the intermediate stuff, right? He's very good close to the line of scrimmage. He's very good deep.
Yep.
And that's kind of where he's at now. I think we've seen this in the past with a guy like DK Metcalf coming out of the same program. He would run a lot of stop routes right there, or he'd run a lot of go routes, and that was kind of his role in that offense. I don't know if I think Jonathan Mingo has done a little bit more than DK Metcalf, because DK Metcalf literally was those two things. That was it. He either was running deep or he was faking like he was running deep and stopping
And a beefcake.
and looking for the ball. So Jonathan Mingo's got, I think, a little bit more route running savvy coming into the NFL than a guy like that. He's not not as explosive, obviously, and or as big as DK Metcalf. So I don't want to make it sound like
they're not one and the same.
They're not one and the same, but coming from the same program,
similar traits,
some similar traits. So as long as he develops that middle kind of ground, that the intermediate stuff, I think for sure he's a guy that has the physical skills to be a number one wide receiver.
And we've seen it recently. And look, you have to scout the individual player. You can't just helmet scout. Right. But there are programs that tend to do a better job developing their wide receivers than others. We talk about all the time Ohio State with Brian Hartline. Right. They do a fantastic job. But look at all the guys that Ole Miss has put out over the past decade. I mean, tons of guys. A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. We just had Elijah Moore come out. Like, there have been some very good, talented receivers that have come out of this program. And that gives you a little extra hope that, maybe he does have some of that background training, that step to the NFL might not be as big as it is for some other guys.
Yeah, he's very intriguing. I mean, everything you guys mentioned with the size and stuff, I thought he got the line pretty well as well for something he did really.
I do have a good release
really
score on him.
Yeah, I thought he did that really well. I thought he tracked the ball really well, and I thought not only did he track the ball well, I thought he used his body well. So he's a big receiver that knows how to. We see that a lot, right? Like. Quentin Johnson, for example, doesn't always do that. But like a receiver that he's a big body receiver that knows how to use that body and like block out that defensive back to help him put in a better position to catch the football. I thought he did that really well. And you mentioned the production's not there. So when you're watching the tape, there's not overly a ton to see. So you have to like really go in and just watch his tape in the film room where you could just see his plays and kind of get through it, where his total career, 112 catches, 1,758 yards, and 12 touchdowns. I didn't love his burst. I didn't think he had a second gear. But I feel like he's fast enough. He didn't get a lot of separation either, so he does have to work on that.
He's more of a contested catch guy.
It could probably come with better route running. That's why I thought his routes were kind of meh. I think if he can kind of hone it up a little bit, I think he does have the hips. I think he does have the movement skills to do better there and kind of get that separation. So I understand when Daniel Jeremiah says, hey, here's a player that is right, like on more NFL GM's boards, going to his tape, it immediately gave me some bias, right? Because like I heard that, and I'm like, but when I came away from, I'm like, oh, I see it, like, yeah. And more so, I see it after watching this class as a whole. So being the back end of the receivers of watching the tape and kind of like studying on, like it does make way more sense. Like if I'm an NFL team, like. Same way where like I'm bigger on Marvin Mims and Cedric Tillman, like in the long run, kind of like at the end of our process a couple of years ago, I was like, what I've realized is I'm way too low on Michael Pittman Jr. Yeah. Right? Like when you get to the end of all your tape watching, like it puts a lot of more stuff in clarity because like early on you're watching all the
finally got everything in perspective. The whole class as a whole. So to me, when I look at a guy like Jonathan Mingo, it's like, okay, like Garrett said, it sucks because we have a lot of receivers in the Nerd Herd episode we're gonna talk about are like 5'9", and they're like in college in their skill set, like they're very talented receivers. Like when it comes to like talent wise, like these guys got like the cream of the crop, where the big guys have a lot to work on. Like if you take all the talent from the small guys and put in these big guys' bodies, like you have really good talent. And the problem with that, with these small guys being 5'9" or lower, like the odds of them ever producing, they have to be outliers. And there's one guy I do think that could be an outlier, but for the most part, you're literally crossing your fingers and hoping for outliers. So the fact that you have all those guys in your top 5, I just couldn't get, they're there, but they're not there because I don't know if I would draft them. And I'll tell you next week why, because you're waiting for outliers. Because if you look at the history if you literally look at the NFL history, and I'm a big, I've been playing Dynasty fantasy football now for like 19 years, right? I've been playing fantasy football now for like 25 years. And I'm a really big history guy, right? Like it's like when I play poker, like I'm looking at odds and all that. Like that all comes into effect. So when the history tells me that if you're 5'9" or lower and you can't find success in the NFL from a fantasy football perspective, that you're not, the odds of you scoring 1,000 yards in a season are really low, so which means you're going to have to be a PPR guy. That worries me because when you have guys that are that small, you're literally talking about outliers like Wes Welker, Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, and I think there's literally only one other receiver that's even produced at that level at that skill set. Steve Smith, where was he at? Was he 5'9"?
He might
have been like right at Deshaun Jackson's right in that same.
So if you're 5'9" and a half, it doesn't count. 5'9". He's got a 5'9".
5'9" or shorter. Right?
So it does get me a little bit more excited circling back here to a guy like Mingo who has the size, the strength. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's run strong. Like he's tough to bring down. So we also, as I mentioned, he had a good combine. We also had a good Senior Bowl as well. So it does give me. I just put out my tweet of my top 15 guys. I just kind of ran out of characters, and I did have Booty on that list. And now if I had to retweet it, which it doesn't matter because one more week I'm in my final rankings anyways.
Sure.
I would put Mingo ahead of Keyshawn Booty.
And so this is top 15 overall, not top 15 receivers.
I just put them in tiers.
Gotcha.
It was my top. If you look at my Twitter at Dynasty Rich, I put my top 15 one QB. I already tweeted out there I put Tyler Scott too low for something mistakenly. He would have been my third tier, but Mingo would kind of get into that probably fourth tier if I had to rewrite it right now.
So
it's how fluid these guys are.
You mentioned that having smaller guys in the top 5. The part of it is there's just no one else to put in there.
I get it.
And that's the tough part of it.
Totally get it, man.
That doesn't mean I would necessarily draft them over the running backs or some of the tight ends, but they have to go. They have to go somewhere, and you have to put some people in your top 5. But going back to Mingo real quickly, I think the other thing that we don't always focus on enough is what NFL teams are doing. And remember, NFL teams aren't only looking for skill. That is part of the equation for them, but they have certain roles that they need to fill. So there are going to be teams that Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Josh Downs, those guys are going to be off their boards completely.
We got a guy that does the same thing. We don't need it.
We don't need that type of guy, So there might be a team where I'd love him to go there, but there might be a team where it's just saying, we're not drafting anybody that doesn't fit this type of profile.
Or we don't even use that in our offense. We
Exactly.
Don't need that
But
guy.
the Arizona Cardinals are 100% not drafted one of those guys.
They've got Brown and Moore.
They completely already missed on another guy that fits that exact same profile,
Andy Isabella.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So they're 100% not drafting that guy. You know what I mean?
You would think.
Speaking of that.
Look
If
at
they
you.
can learn
Look
their-
at you 100% and something. Oh, man.
That works out most of the time. I'm 100% right 50% of the time.
There you
60% of the time, it works every time.
All right.
go. All right, so moving on. Jonathan Mingo, good prospect. We all like him, but
We're so close to